in getting it right.
You're right. Yeah, I'm agreeing with you 100% there that you see, as much as, if I can only speak from my own, religious perspective, that it doesn't necessarily, DV awareness doesn't necessarily fall under the remit of an imam, right? However, with the changing times, it seems like the dynamics of the scope is as such whereby it's high time that the faith leaders were trained, in creating awareness, and then they can rope in the facts from our deen, from our religion, into that awareness training so that people understand, when it's happening at home and लोग जो हैं वो गलत misconstrue करके दीन की बातों को और मिक्स अप और मिशमैश करके और डीवी का सहारा मतलब दीन का सहारा लेते हैं डीवी को डेमोन्स्ट्रेट करने के लिए तो अगर हमारे फेथ लीडर्स ट्रेन हो जाते हैं डीवी की अवेयरनेस में I see no reason why they shouldn't be able to slightly touch upon different topics in every Friday sermon, because that's the most long sermon that we have. And even every now and then, हर नमाज से पहले आप जो है वो एक gentle reminder दे सकते हैं हमारे मर्दों को क्योंकि ज्यादातर मर्द ही हैं जो कि जाते हैं मस्जिदों में नमाज अदा करने के लिए औरतें भी जाती हैं ममानित तो नहीं है it's not stopped however majority of the men go in our religion so I think that definitely faith leaders play a huge part in it and each one of us if we look at it as a community we all have a role to play in it when we see something wrong then if we can't do nothing about it with your hands then at least say something from your mouth these are the three levels of our iman and if you can't say it from your mouth then at least in your heart consider it to be wrong so if you haven't if you feel that you're nowhere at those three levels of your iman of your faith and much rather you misconstruing the deep wisdom and understanding of the holy scripts and manipulating them in your own favor based on your own convenience then that's highly wrong I would say it's heinous in my eyes it's really really bad so moving on then both of you, or Harpalji, since you're a clinical psychologist, perhaps you'd be able to give us a deeper insight. That you spoke about learned behaviors, right? As our viewers know, our conversation is always going to be revolving around domestic violence and different forms of domestic violence. So the first, segment is about creating awareness around different forms. The second segment is to talk more about why does a perpetrator do what he or she does. And you touched upon the fact that it's just the learned behaviors that they're exhibiting. So growing older, whatever they saw their parents doing and treating each other the way that they treated each other, when these children grow older, they replicate the same model in their own relationships. So is there a chance that these learned behaviors can be changed? Can the perpetrator, work upon changing the learned behaviors? If they identify, most of the times they don't even identify. And if it's a wife, गलती से बीवी अगर कह देना कि आप जो हो ये बात गलत करते हो और आपकी परवरिश शायद इस तरह से हुई है कि कहीं कोई कमी आ गई आपकी वालिदैन की तरफ से कि आप मुझे लाते मुक्के थप्पड़ मारते हैं गलती से भी अगर बीवी ने ये बात कह दी तो उनकी अना को उनकी ईगो को ठेस पहुंचती है तो फिर तो उन्होंने बिल्कुल ही बात माननी भी नहीं है तो सबसे पहले क्या लर्न बिहेवियर्स चेंज हो सकते हैं और अगर हो सकते हैं तो who should be the ideal person to make the perpetrator understand and realize that look you're going wrong there and clearly if the wife mentions it it's not going to help
learned behavior can go two ways positive and negative I've had many cases जहाँ पर घर में शराब काफी तौर तक पी जाती है और बच्चे के इफेक्ट होता है कि भाई मेरे अब्बू शराब पीते हैं मैं आगे और नशे में हालत होते हैं या काफी बुरी तरह से होते हैं तो वो सोचते हैं कि मैं शराब को हाथ नहीं लाऊंगा but that's a positive of learned behavior कि भाई he's seen his father being drunken and being violent and he thinks himself I'm not going to do this and that's a positive on the flip side of things, these negative behaviors that we learned. I was being with a person from the Asian community and speaking to him, and he goes, if I hit my wife once or twice a week, it's not domestic violence, it's discipline. And so we talked about it. I go, why is it discipline? He goes, firstly, if she does something wrong, she should know that something is wrong. And if she's done something wrong, she should be punished for it. And I said, where did your thinking coming from? He goes, the same thing happened to my mother. When she did something wrong, my father would hit her and discipline her. And the same thing was replicated by my grandfather in Pakistan, India, wherever they came from. When she did something wrong, she was disciplined. So he had this narrative. It could be, if you've done something wrong, you should be disciplined. I then questioned him. I said, if you do something wrong, can I discipline you? He stood there for a moment, सोचने लगा कि what am I talking about? I said, you've done a lot of things wrong this week, this month. Can I now hit you because I need to tell you that you're wrong? He goes, no, you're violating my human rights. तो मैंने कहा कि if I'm violating your human rights and it's GBH, ABH and everything else, what about your wife? So he took a moment to realize that what he was doing may have been all right in the past, but in this country is against the law. Sometimes जब तक ठेस नहीं पड़ती ना, बंदा change नहीं होता. And it's unfortunate. Can behavior change? Yes, it can change. Is it going to be changed very easily? No, it's not. It depends on an individual's upbringing and how they learn. If in your community, if your mom says कि ये गलत है, आपने नहीं करना, there's more chance of them listening. There's more chance of them understanding. But if a wife says the same thing, it will go the wrong way. She'll probably get disciplined more. And this is something that I would urge all faith leaders to start talking about, is domestic violence and the understanding of what was perfectly fine 50, 100 years ago is not the same now.
Yeah, makes sense. Would you like to make a comment on that, Seemaji?
Yeah, I'll answer the second part of the question in terms of who is best placed to sort of, spread those messages in terms of looking at learned behaviours and what we can do to perhaps educate people better. That there are perpetrator training programs and models that our faith leaders can look at. Let's, rather than sort of reinventing the wheel, let's see what these perpetrator programs are about. And let's make them culturally specific to each one of our own cultures and religions, so that actually, we can adopt good practices from these perpetrator programs. And as far as who is the best place to deliver that, well, then we need to look at who has the most influence in our community. Is it our faith leaders? Do we have sort of TV channels like Takbeer where we can sort of talk about these things? Social media? Generally sort of running programs within religious institutes. There are lots of options in terms of who is the correct person or the correct bodies to actually sort of look at mindset change and learning and reversing and changing those learned behaviours. We can also look at sort of the more individual work with the type of work that Harbalji has done, where he's worked specifically with perpetrators and on an individual and one-to-one basis. But in order for that to happen, there has to be some quite acute and specific training happening within our faith leaders and our faith institutes, so that actually we can really deliver these sort of training courses and this sort of awareness where we are trying to really tackle learnt behaviours. I really respect what you said about the whole idea of, even if it is just snippets of sort of awareness and information being passed through sermons on a Friday. Like you say, majority of the people who attend mosques are men. What can we do to subliminally and obviously actually sort of really get some messages across about, firstly, come forward and talk to us if you do think that there is a problem with your own behaviours. Secondly, so that people can understand where the behaviours might be wrong in the first place if they're already not aware of it. And thirdly, men are victims of domestic abuse too. So actually, let's really encourage men to come forward and talk about what they might be going through as well. Because domestic abuse, sometimes, it's not always the case that the perpetrator is 100% the perpetrator and the victim is always 100% the victim. That those roles can switch over. Sometimes it depends on who's got the power on the day. And so, like a man can be as much a victim of physical, psychological, and all the other types of abuse as well, as much as a woman. So if we can really encourage and normalize talking about healthy relationships, normalize talking about what domestic abuse is and how actually there is help available, there is methods that we can use through psychotherapy, through education, and through sermons to actually really educate the wider community, then actually there is much room for much work to be done to actually help start reversing these learned behaviors.
Yeah, and as much as I, appreciate what you're saying, and one good thing that I've been able to pick up from this conversation is that, I'm thinking, of the experience of actually being in the masjid or mosque right now, and the sermon is going on, and I know that on one side the hall is full of women as well as elderly women, and on the other side it's a hall full of men and mostly elderly men who are the decision makers in our homes, if you like. So, as much as the imam or the faith leader is creating awareness and emphasizing, on compassion and developing and creating healthy boundaries in relationships and normalizing such conversations, in the same breath, it's going to be a culture change as well, because it's like, it's a huge group of people, if you like. And those are the guys, those are the people who, represent our community. Those are the guys who are representing our culture as well, you see. So I think it's a two-pronged strategy. The importance of the faith leaders to create awareness, not only bringing in the spiritual element, but that's going to eventually cascade into bringing a paradigm shift into the culture as well. Yeah, so I think that it's going to have a more powerful impact if it gets done. The awareness bit gets done within spiritual institute setting, if you like. So that's something really great, yeah, that I could think of. Now, we spoke about, psychological interventions, and you interestingly mentioned about the mindset. So the first thing that comes to my mind in terms of, being able to change the learned behaviors, and you mentioned that there are perpetrator training programs. I'm thinking that, when it comes to these training programs, the counseling element is obviously concerned more with the past, and in many cases it's been heard as though people are, if they take the counseling route, they're prone to relive their past better experiences, which they have essentially dug in as a grave for ages ago, and they don't want to talk about it. So, what kind of other modalities would you recommend, Harpalji, which are more focused on the now, in the present, and helping their performance to improve in the future? If it's not necessarily counseling, I know you're a psychotherapist, and there's a huge scope for that, definitely. But apart from that, which other modalities would you recommend?
Within counseling, your CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy, it looks at the
Yeah.
here and now, works on your thinking, your thought processes, and what you need to do. So that could be another sort of line of work. But I'm going to reflect you back to a program called Alcohol Anonymous. And this is where people who have been alcoholics want to become alcohol free. And a lot of it is based around acceptance of what alcohol is. And to be truly working on your actions, inactions, you've got to accept what you've done. So there's got to be an element of realizing what's happened in the past and working on that past. So it may not be childhood, it could be what you did 3-4 years ago or since your marriage, working on what's going on. Otherwise, if you don't work on that, it's always going to be there and you're always going to be resistant to change.
Mm.
Likely, this was alternative A lot of the times when I look at domestic violence or I look at learned behavior, there's parallels behind it. So it could be anger, it could be frustration, it could be an abuse itself. And that's why it's interesting to work on those thoughts and feelings. If you're a builder, if a wall's been broken, it's best off to remove the wall than to add to the wall. And sometimes it's easier to go back to the root, get rid of the root, and then replant. So coming back to you answering your question, yes, there are alternatives. CBT is one of them. You can go into music, yoga forms to work on the here and now. But it doesn't mean that you address the question. For some, it may be a temporary fix. For some, it can be the best thing that they need to do once they've processed what they need to. But it's based on everyone's individual, because not everyone's individual thinking is the same. People act differently. That's why there's different modalities. It may be the fact they might want to go speak to a coach, because speaking to a mental health professional may not be part of their understanding because of the taboos attached to it. Whereas if you're talking to, say, a life coach, you're addressing the question but without labeling the question. Whereas if you're seeing a therapist or you're seeing a counselor or psychotherapist or psychologist, psychiatrist, you have to own up to the fact that there is an issue there. So there's many ways of attacking it. But personally, to make it really work, seek help in some sort of way. Denial is not going to help you.
True. Yeah, definitely.
Whatever it is work with it.
Yeah, you're right. And then, Seema ji, and the question is to both of you, ये जो इमोशनल अब्यूज है और जो स्पिरिचुअल अब्यूज है, ऑब्वियसली इट्स ड्रास्टिकली डिफरेंट टू फिजिकल अब्यूज जो कि बॉडी पे नजर भी आता है. इनके जो इम्पैक्ट्स हैं ये दिखते नहीं है इंसान के उस वक्त, at the moment in time. However, the scars, are left lifelong on a person. The imprint of emotional as well as spiritual abuse are left on a person's heart and mind for life. At times they're scarred for life. As much as they try, there are always going to be some triggers which just brings back, flashbacks to them. So what could be a preventive measure that, the situation doesn't escalate that far, कि people are literally doomed for life? तो इतनी fine line है ना एक communication gap में, और उसी communication जो कि किसी भी healthy relationship में हो सकता है, and अगर दो बंदे एक कपल की जो इंटेंशन है उसको अंडरस्टैंड करने की यहाँ पे जरूरत है कि क्या उस बंदे की इंटेंशन नेसेसरीली किसी को दूसरी पार्टी को हार्म या हर्ट करने की थी, कि was just one of those के he or she had a tiring day and it's just a mood swing, if you like. So many a times, as much as awareness is being created, people's understanding is not grounded. So either they take a mismatch of expectation or a gap in communication to be DV, and vice versa, whereas it's actually DV, but they're thinking it's not DV and it's just a mismatch of communication, a lack somewhere. तो इस फाइन लाइन को किस तरह से हम जो है वो लोगों को आगाही दें, अवेयरनेस क्रिएट करें कि वो साइंस पिकअप कर सकें कि what is DV and what is just a gap in a communication between a couple.
Okay, so पहली चीज तो ये है कि there's, it's emotional intelligence is something that a lot of people don't necessarily want to look into. We all think that we all have a degree of emotional intelligence, but early intervention of understanding your feelings and your emotions, quite often when somebody offends us or hurts our feelings, it could be intentional or unintentional. Whether or not you have been hurt by that is the question to be asked. So, if I say something to offend you, Hinaji, I might not have intended it, but you may have received it that way. So sometimes we have to ask ourselves, what is it about that issue that offended us? And you know, we're not saying that a victim of abuse should continuously just look within themselves for answers.
And if not, scared. And that's something that really needs to be addressed in our communities is men taking the lead about talking. Ladies can talk forever. Ladies can talk about the emotions, which is great. But men need to be able to talk as well.
You're right. You're absolutely right. फिर वो भी तो I think it's one of those के the more we make noise, the more we talk about it, the more we, encourage people and normalize things, then they would become comfortable, and it's going to become the new norm. Just the way, doing things virtually is now a new norm. This is like a whole campaign of getting everybody together to develop the IT skills, develop the skills required for the, new era, if you like. Similarly, if we all together, as a collective, start running these campaigns to create awareness and encourage people, both the men and women, to talk about, their feelings, that would be a good start, I suppose. And then once when they're comfortable with opening up, then we can slowly, steadily, cascade them towards being, creating awareness around DV as well.
Yeah. One thing I'll say is in communication, it's listening is very, very important as well.
Yeah.
With listening is hearing and there's active listening. I've worked on couples who one person's talking, the other person's on his mobile phone playing Candy Crush. That's not listening. फिर बाद में पूछते हैं कि भाई अच्छा तूने क्या कहा था मुझको पहले वहां से दूसरे बंदे को गुस्सा चढ़ता है. I was talking to you, you're playing Candy Crush or you're on your mobile phone or you're watching Netflix and I'm here speaking to you. And that's disrespect. There's very much disrespect to the individual who's talking, especially if he or she is your husband or wife.
Yeah,
men are
absolutely.
quite guilty of this because what happens is they feel the woman is nagging. So what I say to couples is schedule 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes, whatever time is needed in 1 week or a couple of days where you can talk about your issues and talk about your problems openly. And you start
so right.
I am feeling bad because of, or I'm feeling scared because of, or I'm feeling upset, uncomfortable because of. When you reflect on how I'm feeling, you're more likely to listen. If you say, you are making me feel bad, you are making me feel angry, you are doing this, you are doing that, they switch off. And this comes back to the emotional intelligence, is how to talk to people. अगर बीमी ने बेगम ने घर में रसोई में दाल ने चीनी भाई पहली जी कहते तुम्हारी माँ ने तुमको क्या सिखाया है?
Yeah,
it's one of those inherited traits, but it's so bad.
Yeah.
If you went to your workplace and someone made something wrong, and you say तुम्हारी माँ ने तुमको क्या सिखाया, you probably get disciplined. But we get away with it at home.
Yeah.
And if she says, she says, तुम्हारी माँ ने तुझको क्या सिखाया है, तो वो, and she might turn around and says, तुम्हारी माँ ने तुझको सोफे पे बैठने को टीवी पे सिखाया है. So that's where the argument comes forward. And then before you know it, arguments start because she didn't put enough dal, it's enough salt in the dal. And it happens. Arguments happen very, very petty things, and they explode. And when you start saying, you do this to me, you do that to me, the other person will get defensive. And when a person gets defensive, they shut down.
Yeah.
Then it becomes point scoring. अच्छा तूने ये कहा मैं वो कहूंगी. Before you know it, you're in a point scoring or tennis match. इसने ball को मारा, उसने ball को मारा, and it doesn't help. And relationships need to work on people being actively talking to each other, actively listening, and looking from the other person's side of view. अगर नहीं करेंगे ना, तो relationship नहीं है, सौदा. और भाई प्यार में सौदा नहीं होता.
Very true, very true. I've had a reflective moment on that note, and I'm just thinking, subhanallah, even after, if a wife is telling the husband many a times that, look, I'm feeling uncomfortable and I feel as though you need to seek some advice, some kind of a therapy to help you overcome your anger issues, or you being rude and you're not being polite. And still, if the husband is determined, knowing that the wife has shared her concern, billion times, and still I'm not accepting, and just to even say, for example, in your heart, you believe that there's nothing wrong, but just to, there's no harm to go, and seek some therapy, seek some consultation, just because, to identify what is the reality. If my wife is saying it so many times, she's shared her concern, then perhaps there could be something wrong with me as well. We're all humans and we all do make mistakes. So you see, it's just that ego that kicks in that makes a person to believe, and stay delusional that there's nothing wrong with me. That male ego or perpetrator mindset ego, if you like, that no, there's nothing.
It may be, but it may not be. Because as soon as
Yeah,
you say you need to do this, you should do this, you got to do this, you got to do it, it becomes an order.
yeah.
Unfortunately, men don't like to be ordered.
Mm,
But if you turn it around and go, I feel bad because you or what you did made me feel really sad, or it made me feel uncomfortable, or I was scared when you started shouting at me. You're being more reflective rather than
yeah,
direct.
yeah,
We've got to be, and this is where active communication comes in.
yeah,
If your boss keeps saying to you, you're doing this wrong, you are shit, you're doing this, you can't do this, you're not good at this, you're not good enough, you will feel bad about yourself. Then you might start taking sick days, you might start not going to work. In relationships, it's the same. The more you point fingers at someone, they take it different ways. So this is where active communication is very, very key. You go, if you go to the GP, you'd say मुझको यहाँ पे पेन है, मुझको यहाँ जब मैं ये खाती हूँ तो ये होता है, अगर मुझको लातों में पेन है जब मैं चलती हूँ तो ये होता है. You don't say, you tell me what's wrong with me. You're the GP, you're the expert, you need to know what it is. It's very reflective. Same way in
yeah.
communications. You've got to be very reflective and go, this is what's happening to me. This is how I feel. This is my thought process. This is what's going on for me. जब आप आते हो ये आप ये करते हो वो करते हो, and that's being reflective.
Yeah.
And men and women are more open to be more reflective once they see the other person. Because when you talk, when you point score, you talk out anger, you talk out frustration. But it's making sure that you use that frustration, that anger, which is a raw emotion, in a positive, not negative light. And when we get quite close to a partner or a husband, wife, we know what makes them tick. We will know what will, if it, ये बात कहेंगे ना तो इसको गुस्सा चढ़ेगा, ये बात करेंगे शांति मिलेगी. We're very, very close in that way. We know what's going on. But yet we still do the same thing each and every time because it's easier. Easier to point fingers than it is to be reflective.
Yeah, yeah, you're so right. And also the pressure of name shame, we can't undermine the pressure of the community pressure of name shame. I mean, a woman can take anything on herself, but rather not bring any shame to the family. So that's something that needs to be, spoken about at a larger scale as well. So over to you, Seemaji. Would you like to, make any closing comments? Because I understand we're coming to the, end of the program. Perhaps you'd like to touch upon, the recent pattern that you're seeing or experiencing in the DV cases that you're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, as far as recent patterns are concerned, there is a massive increase of reports of domestic violence happening within our Asian communities and people coming out. And I think that is actually a good thing. The more people that come out and say that I'm a victim of domestic abuse and I need help, the more chances that there are that we can get people professional help. And also sort of just touching on what you've just said there, that, we need to encourage people to come out and talk, whether it's talking to a professional or talking to, a friend. But we mustn't sort of we mustn't use shame to hold us back. Because there is no shame in saying that I have issues with my relationship that are making me feel very uncomfortable, and I want to seek help, either to improve the relationship that I have with my family members at home, or to break free from them because I can see that this is an unacceptable, toxic relationship that I can no longer cope with. But either way, do not feel shame in actually coming out and asking for help.
Yeah, that's very good advice that you've given. Thank you very much again, both of you, to join us on this program, and I'm hoping that people are going to definitely benefit from the information that you've shared with them. Until we meet next month, take good care all. See you later.
Thank you.
Eating healthy can be confusing. It's hard to know what to buy, especially when we all need a different daily amount of calories. But thanks to colour-coded labels, making healthier choices has never been simpler. Just remember, choose less red, go more green instead. And by checking the labels, you'll also find it easier to stay inside your calorie limit for the day, and it needn't cost you more. Nice. So be a smart shopper. Go for more green.
اندر اندر مشکل مچایا جان
حضرت سہل بن سعد رضی اللہ تعالی عنہ سے روایت ہے کہ رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم نے فرمایا، مومن کی نیت اس کے عمل سے بہتر ہوتی ہے اور منافق کا عمل اس کی نیت سے زیادہ خوشنما نظر آتا ہے، اور ہر شخص کا عمل اس کی نیت کے تابع رہتا ہے۔ جب مومن کوئی عمل کرتا ہے تو اس کی وجہ سے اس کے قلب میں ایک نور چمکتا ہے۔ منافق کی نیت چونکہ اچھی نہیں ہوتی، اس لیے اس کا عمل بے نور ہوتا ہے۔
ام المومنین سیدہ عائشہ صدیقہ رضی اللہ عنہا سے روایت ہے کہ حضور نبی کریم صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم نے فرمایا، جسے یہ پسند ہو کہ جب وہ بارگاہ الہی میں حاضر ہو تو اللہ تبارک و تعالی اس پر راضی ہو تو وہ مجھ پر کثرت سے درود و سلام بھیجے۔ حضور نبی کریم صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم نے ارشاد فرمایا، میں آخری نبی ہوں اور میری مسجد انبیاء کی بنائی ہوئی مسجدوں میں آخری مسجد ہے۔
لائق ارشاد وہ مرشد ہے کہ اگر طالب سے صغیرہ یا کبیرہ گناہ وقوع میں آئے تو اسی دم باطن میں غوطہ لگا کر مجلس نبوی صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم میں پہنچ کر نبی اکرم صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم سے اس کے گناہ بخشوائے۔
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم يا أهل أهل الكتاب قد جاءكم رسولنا يبين لكم كثيرا مما كنتم تخفون من الكتاب قد جاءكم رسولنا يبين لكم كثيرا مما كنتم تخفون من الكتاب ويعفو عن كثير قد جاءكم من الله نور وكتاب مبين۔
ایک کتاب والو، بے شک تمہارے پاس ہمارے رسول تشریف لائے کہ تم پر ظاہر فرماتے ہیں بہت سی وہ چیزیں جو تم نے کتاب میں چھپا ڈالی تھی، اور بہت سی معاف فرماتے ہیں۔ بے شک تمہارے پاس اللہ کی طرف سے ایک نور آیا اور روشن کتاب۔
یوں سمجھو کہ مرشد کامل آفتاب کی طرح ہے اور طالب ذرے کی طرح۔ نہ آفتاب ذرے سے جدا ہوتا ہے نہ ذرہ آفتاب سے۔ جو مرشد اسی طرح پر فنا فی اللہ اور نور الہدا ہو، وہ قال سے تعلق نہیں رکھتا، بلکہ خواب و بیداری میں قرب، مشاہدہ و وصال سے تعلق رکھتا ہے۔
بیٹا اپنے والدین کو کیسے راضی کرے؟ والدین اگر بیٹے سے ناراض فوت ہو جائیں تو ان کو 3 چیزوں سے راضی کرے۔ نمبر 1، بیٹا خود نیک بنے، کیونکہ والدین کے لیے بیٹے کے نیک ہونے سے زیادہ پسندیدہ چیز کوئی نہیں۔ نمبر 2، ان کے رشتہ داروں اور دوستوں سے تعلق رکھے اور ان سے نیکی کرے۔ نمبر 3، ان کے لیے مغفرت طلب کرے، دعا کرے اور صدقہ کرے۔
حضرت ابو ہریرہ رضی اللہ تعالی عنہ سے روایت ہے کہ رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم نے فرمایا، اللہ تعالیٰ نے میری امت سے دل میں پیدا ہونے والے وسوسوں اور برے خیالات کو معاف کر دیا ہے، جب تک ان پر عمل نہ ہو اور زبان سے نہ کہا جائے۔
بچھاؤ پل کے ادب کا اعلیٰ مقام آیا۔
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم۔ اللہم صلی علی سیدنا محمد وعلی آل سیدنا محمد واصحاب سیدنا محمد وبارک وسلم وصلی علیہ۔ ناظرین کرام، آپ دیکھ رہے ہیں سوالات و جوابات تکبیر ٹی وی کے ساتھ، اور میں ہوں آپ کا میزبان ایم عالم۔ محبت بھرا سلام قبول کیجئے۔ اور شب برات، شعبان کی 15ویں شب جو ہے، بابرکت رات، وہ بالکل اب قریب آن پہنچی ہے، اور میرے مصطفیٰ صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم کا ارشاد ہے، آپ نے فرمایا کہ شعبان میرا مہینہ ہے۔ اور بہت ساری احادیث سے یہ ملتا ہے کہ رمضان کے بعد آقا علیہ الصلوۃ والسلام سب سے زیادہ روزہ رکھنے کا اہتمام شعبان کے مہینے میں کرتے تھے۔ آپ فرماتے تھے کہ شعبان کے مہینے میں چونکہ بنی آدم کا ہر وہ آدمی جو پیدا ہونے والا ہے اس کا لکھا جاتا ہے، جس نے اس سال اس دنیا سے اللہ کی سپرد ہو جانا ہے، وصال کر جانا ہے، اس کا لکھا جاتا ہے، رزق لکھا جاتا ہے، اور بندوں کے اعمال اس رات کو اوپر اٹھائے جاتے ہیں۔ تو اللہ کی بارگاہ میں جب میرے اعمال پیش ہوں تو میں روزے سے ہوں۔ ناظرین کرام، اس حوالہ سے بہت سارے سوالات ہیں جو آج کے پروگرام میں ہم شامل کریں گے اور ان کے جوابات دیں گے۔ ہمیشہ کی طرح آپ کی جانی پہچانی شخصیت، ہر دل عزیز، نفیس طبیعت کے مالک خوبصورت انداز سے گفتگو کرنے کے مالک جناب مفتی قاسم ضیاء القادری، خطیب جامعہ مسجد مدینہ شیفیلڈ ہمارے ساتھ موجود ہے۔ السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔
وعلیکم السلام ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ ماشاء اللہ ماشاء اللہ۔
مفتی صاحب